Hi. So, how are you all doing? Welcome to another Embedded Hour, the second of the year. It doesn't seem too long ago since we're doing the January one with Dan, but hopefully this month's one is going to be an amazing one. We've got Alessandro and Robert, both from Arm. They're going to be joining us in a minute or two, and I think we're going to have a really good, interesting chat and discussion about the sort of the Arm ecosystem and how we can work with developer evangelists and build that developer community, which I think will be really quite good. That's not going to work on there. First off, there were a couple of announcements. I don't know if you may have seen on my post on LinkedIn or Twitter in the week. We're going to be doing a upcoming FPGA tutorial on crowdsource. Now, this is going to be really quite cool because unusually, sort of like most of these tutorials, we do sort of image processing or motor control or something sort of quite normal and industrial. This time we're actually going to make we're going to make the game or the Pong game. I've got a little video I can show you on my screen if everyone can still see this. So we're going to make the little Pong game using the basis and it's going to be that's gone really weird. But we're going to have the little Pong game running, and it's going to run on a VGA and display. We're going to have this colorful background that you can see, and we're going to be able to change the colorful background, and we're going to be able to change the size of the paddles and everything. And it's going to be really quite an exciting tutorial. So that's really cool. The other one is I've received a Versal board as well. So that's the next generation of Xilinx devices, the ACAP platform. So look out for some blogs that are going to be coming on that. And we've also, and I mentioned this previously in one of the other things, but a guy called Dan Binnon and I and Saket have been working on a book, and along with the book, we've been designing a board as well. So we finally have the boards in hand now. I actually have one in my hand this time, unlike last time when I was showing you a picture. We've been running through some bring up tests and such like on it, and it's gone really well. We've got the Zinc up and running, we've got the DDR up and running, we've got Ethernet up and running, we've got most of the interfaces on there all up and running, and we're just going to start sort of looking at the overall application now. We've retired all the risk on the hardware. But what we're going to do, we're going to be launching a new website for that. As I mentioned, we're going to be launching a new website. We're going to collate everything together, all the details, all the information, and all the tutorials, all the projects, all the design information for the board. That's all going to be on there and made available to everybody. The last little bit of fun I had this month was, I don't know, Kickstarter and actually Crowd Supply are getting quite expensive, because I don't know if anybody did the let's just show those in there now, the OpenCV Kickstarter, and these are a couple of little OpenCV cameras that run on the OpenVINO program with they've got the little myriad image processing chips in there. So they just literally plug in over USB-C, and you can start doing image processing and running convolutional neural networks on there and such like. So I received these a couple of days ago, maybe mid-January actually. I received those, and I've started putting some blogs up on how to get started and up and running with them. I think they're actually quite an interesting application, and should be and a nice little segue, something a little bit different to working purely on FPGAs. But now, actually, I want to get into the meat of the conversation this month, and we've got Robert and Alessandro with us from Arm, and they're developer evangelists. So hopefully they can hear me, and they can turn on their cameras and microphones. And here we go. We have Alessandro and we have Robert. So we must thank Robert, actually, because you're in San Diego, aren't you? So it's pretty early by you.
At 9 a.m. It's okay.
Oh, that's not
not bad at all.
In these days of lockdown, I'm actually finding 9 a.m. is really early, but going to bed at like 4 a.m. is becoming quite normal.
That's why we have some coffee.
Coffee is always the way forward. And Alessandro, you're not in anywhere quite as exotic, are you? You're just up the road from me in Cambridge, I believe.
Absolutely, I'm in Cambridge. So yeah, not as exotic as Robert, but it's been it's been a good week, right? We had sun, so it's good.
Yeah, we had snow as well. I mean,
It's snow as well.
The snow, in the snow in the UK in January, it's been quite good fun. I went sledging in the car the other day. It was good fun.
Very nice.
I managed to live on the one hill in Essex that there is, so it was always good fun in the car. So I'm going to start this off, and I know we've got a few talking points that we want to run through and talk about. But I want to ask first off, what is a developer evangelist? It looks to me, I've worked with you guys for a few years, and it seems ideal and perfect. But can you explain it to perhaps the audience who are not too familiar with that?
Alessandro, do you want me to start it or you?
You started talking, you go.
All right, perfect. So, I mean, to me, a developer evangelist is someone who helps enable, support, communicate, collaborate, overall escalate issues, but more importantly, just works, hand in hand on the ground with the developers in that particular ecosystem. And this isn't just working with, but also growing the communities around these particular technologies that we work with, at ARM. So there's lots of different cool things you can do with ARM devices. There's lots of developers out there, and we want to make sure that the developers have exactly what they need and that we can support those needs, work with them to basically make their dreams come true, right? Like their innovations come to life. And that's in a nutshell, I feel like what we do. Alessandro, I want to hear actually from you. I want to hear what you have to say about this too.
I mean, I think everything you said is obviously what we do, but I think I want to add to that I see myself almost as a bridge, right? Like I'm not the clever one. I'm the one that's connecting the clever ones, across the board, right? So there is a huge ecosystem. I mean, we've got everything you think of like electronic wise is probably got one or two or more ARM cores in there, right? So we are really kind of wide when we look at ARM technology. It's really like everywhere, right? Everywhere you can think of. So I like to think of myself as someone that can't have all that knowledge, right? Like there's no way one person or even a team can have all that knowledge of all those different use cases. But what we do is kind of act as connectors. So as Robert was saying, as enablers. So we try to find the resources and put the resources together to actually enable others to do their job and kind of be successful in what they're doing, right? And we've got a bunch of programs. We'll talk about some stuff later, but I think in a nutshell that that kind of covers it, I guess. Robert, anything else?
No, it's actually kind of funny. You say that we are kind of that bridge, right? And it goes through my mind. Someone comes to me with a problem. It's like I can't necessarily answer. Like I don't know the answer, but I know a guy, and I'll make sure that you get connected with that person, and we'll work together to get your problem solved.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. Though somebody that they can reach out to and say, how do I do this? Where do I go? Where do I possibly go? Because otherwise you just end up knocking on a lot of doors and getting a lot of no's and no answers and annoying people with email before. So I think it's a really good, I've worked with you guys for a couple of years now. I think, Robert, we first met at Lenovo Connect, I think in Vancouver, back when we could actually travel the world.
I miss it.
And not just partaking it via Zoom meetings. But
the world has changed.
It has. It's changing in some very interesting ways, to be fair, in terms of technology and such like, and working from home and everything, and how we're gonna do that. But one of the things that you guys, you really are quite supportive. We were talking about the book and the board earlier on. When I was showing that to people, that actually really wouldn't have happened without you guys at ARM actually helping us out and giving us pointers and helping us create that board. And you've even gone as far as reviewing well, actually you've not, because we've only just finished the draft. You're actually going to go as far as reviewing the book. You're going to review the book for us, and you're going to do. You really are quite supportive, and you don't really ask.
I feel like I need to say something though, Adam. I need to say something. I mean, we are supportive with almost everyone, right? Like everyone that reaches out, we try to be supportive, but we're more supportive with you because we've got this program called the Innovator Program, right? And we've selected some individuals that are, really awesome. And Adam, you're one of them. And that's why we're kind of particularly supportive with you. And, the reason why we selected you is not because, I I mean, there's nothing like hidden or weird or strange about it. It's just because really, like, you've been in front of the community for a long, long time, and you've been doing a lot of great work. And you're kind of an extension of, I see you as an extension of our job or our role, right? So you and the other innovators are really kind of leading that kind of front line, right? You're giving the community what they need, the community, the developers, experts are out there, what they need to do their job, right? And I think that's why we're supporting you, and we're really happy to support you, because we're doing this together, right? Like, it's not, I really think that we're all in this together. As we said before, we don't have all the answers. Sometimes I mean, I call on you for the answers, right?
You do. But so this is an interesting question, actually, this point about the ARM innovators, and I think it leads into some of the points that we wanted to talk about today. Really, is how did this all come about? How did ARM, that sort of focuses on writing microprocessors, processors, how did this entire sort of ecosystem community sort of evolve?
Should I take it, Robert?
Yeah, I think that's you. Yeah, I mean, like, we want to talk about this history, right? Like the history of kind of like how ARM has started to adopt these developers. So yeah, I think that's all you, Alessandro. Let's do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question, and I think it's got probably multiple kind of facets to it. But I think one way to look at it is, in recent years, actually, let me take a step back. Historically, ARM, as you said, has been developing IP, right? So really kind of intellectual property for designing chips, effectively. Like, that's what it was, right? And throughout the history, though, we've always developed software to enable people to integrate that hardware and to actually make their chips, actually work, right? So, we worked with compiler. We worked on a lot of open source projects. We've always have around compilers, around drivers, and so on. And more recently, though, I think there's been a shift towards more complicated software, right? More complicated problems. I mean, just think of autonomy, right? Like, people building all sorts of like really crazy machines that are supposed to drive themselves, right? And I think someone, I don't remember the numbers actually, but someone showed me the number of lines that are required for or estimated for kind of level 4 autonomy car, right? And it's massive. We're talking about millions of lines of code, right? And there is no way that one single person can do that. So it's really, we kind of get it. We realize that software and software developers are more and more important, right? So we found ourselves almost like looking at ways to engage with software developers beyond just the lower level of the stacks, right? Of the stack. So we've started really looking at how can we do more? How can we engage with more software developers? And that's what kind of started started my role and Robert's role, right? Like, there was before us, there wasn't really many others looking at this kind of world from an ARM perspective, right? So yeah, I think that's probably a good way to kind of give a bit of context around how it all started.
And I think the whole developer evangelist role, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I feel like it hasn't really been around that long, right? And not that long at ARM either. And so, looking at the stuff that we're doing, we kind of take in all of the stuff that the community is doing now. We focus on the stuff that the community is doing. And believe it or not, ARM is actually pretty big. And there are a lot of people behind the scenes, like Alessandro mentioned, working on all these software projects, working with our partners, working to enable the ecosystem, all these developers and the chips. But at its core, you still have basically that communication layer. Are we listening? Are we bringing the right things forward to these amazing engineers in ARM that are building these things? And they're doing all the work, but sometimes they just kind of need to be pointed in a direction so that we're doing the right work. I mean, we could try to do everything, but you just really can't. And so, a developer evangelist kind of tries to pinpoint those things that need more attention. We work together with the partners that, do these things. We partner with open source repositories. We work very closely with companies like Linaro, who do the open source enablement for the Linux kernel on ARM chipsets, reducing that redundancies and fragmentation in that ecosystem. So, like, you get your hands in all these things, but you want to make sure you have your hands in the right things. And I think that's another, aspect, is making sure that you're listening to the community, all those developers out there, and what they need.
I think that's really quite cool. It's an interesting point you made, though, actually, about developer evangelists not being around for very long. I mean, it's maybe the last 2, 3, maybe 4 years, maybe.
That's what it feels like. I mean,
we used to be called a lot of people kind of pop up on my LinkedIn or sort of Twitter or something with that title, and you think that's quite interesting. But again, Alessandro is a really interesting point, because the world is software defined now. I mean, traditionally I'm an electronics guy, an FPGA guy, but over the last sort of 5-6 years, I find myself writing an awful lot more C and working with an awful lot more Linux kernels, even on the FPGAs, than you would ever have dreamt previously. And the world really is software defined, it's software controlled, and it's only going to get more, and it's only going to get more and more so.
I was just going to add that, you guys mentioned that there hasn't been many developer evangelists around, maybe it started a few years ago. I wonder if that's if we're a bit biased because we live in a kind of IoT embedded space, and therefore perhaps we haven't seen them, because they used to be I think there's always been cloud developer evangelists, right? Or other sorts of developer evangelists in perhaps other software industries, right? Perhaps it's a new thing for our kind of world, right? But I don't know. It's an open question. I don't have the answer, but I wonder if
it is interesting. I mean, the other thing coming back to software, and traditionally, we think about it because we're engineers. We probably most likely went to university or we did some sort of coding boot camp or something. But literally everybody these days is learning to do some sort of code. And it's funny, in between the gaps between lockdown, we had some work done on the house because it needed doing. And I was having because you want human interaction, so I was having a little bit of a socially distanced chat with the person that was doing the work. And he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing some, I do FPGAs and software and such like." And he said, he's there working away. He's like, "I write Python of an evening." It's like, I'm teaching myself Python of an evening to do this. It was really kind of it was really quite interesting just to see how it's gone from being that sort of domain of the geek to sort of everybody, and a lot of people are doing sort of work with Python and such like, which is really good, and it helps everybody do it. So coming back to the kind of some of the things I want to talk about, you mentioned how community, and it's an important thing. You've got the ARM Innovator community, but you've got a wider ecosystem community. So how did you set about building the community? Do you have any sort of ethos or sort of strategies or sort of foundations that you try and build your community around to make sure it's fair and equitable and open? Or?
If I may start on this one.
You may indeed, yeah.
So I look at the community, or I like to call it more so the ecosystem of communities, as 5 specific pillars that I like to kind of focus on. And then you build out these pillars to strengthen the foundation, right? So the way I look at these 5 pillars are, one being ARM, right? So the greater company, ARM, all the things that we do as a whole, how can we, use ARM as a community internally to push things out and bring things in. Then you have kind of the individual, call it groups within ARM, the ones that have their specialties in open source, specialties in infrastructure, cloud, IoT. And these little communities kind of work on their own and provide a specialty offering out into the ecosystem. Then you have our partners, right? So we have just so many amazing partners doing so many amazing things with their own communities. And so ARM, we get to kind of work with these communities, again, folding it all under kind of this greater ARM ecosystem of communities. Then, believe it or not, our partners have partners that might not be our partners, people that they're working with that we don't necessarily get to be so close to, but we still want to be a part of this. And so, we can work with our partners to work with their partners and then even grow the ecosystem bigger, growing those communities. And I'm not getting into the little subtleties here, right? Like building each of these pillars. But again, this is the definition that I look at from a whole. So after you get to that, to the partners, ARM, our different groups, we have the greater developer community. And this is kind of like people who aren't necessarily focused on one particular thing. This is just anyone in the developer community up and down the stack. And we look at this as kind of like those 5 pillars. And how do we tackle these 5 pillars? Well, I'm not sure if we should start by talking about this whole COVID thing, because it did drive us into a bit of a situation where, we realized how Alessandro and I actually, I mean, we were sitting down, I think like a year ago, and we're on a Zoom call, and we're like, how do we get out to these developers? I mean, a lot of big companies, tech companies, they're focused on event after event after event. And you say, okay, well, this next event is coming up. Let's just get this whole marketing cycle going. Let's get all of our announcements ready. And at that event, we're going to push this stuff out. But how do you extend the range of these events? How do you connect them together? How do you make some way to essentially have a year-long campaign that you're just nonstop working with the developers? And this is where the whole kind of, we'll call it the digital assets for the ARM software developer community were born. Talking about YouTube, Twitter, engagement on Discord, real-time chats, our community forums. All these things bring us closer together and allow us to communicate on a much more personal level. And we're going to talk about some of the cool live streams that Alessandro and I do, but these things didn't exist for us at ARM prior to literally less than a year ago. And so now we have all of these really cool assets, places that we can go, channels that we can go live in with our developers and bring these communities together all under the ARM ecosystem, working with our partners, working with the developers, and truly collaborating in a collaborative space, right? I don't know. Alessandro, did I miss anything there?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I just
sometimes I tangent off.
No, I just wanted to add maybe one other aspect of it,
Please.
right? So I think there is a human aspect to all this, right? Like, I think, we do it as a job, but actually I think both me and Robert really like our job for various reasons, right? One is really because we get to connect with people, right? And I think we've realized that actually when COVID happened, I think actually I used to see you a lot, Adam, at different conferences, right? We were all traveling quite a lot. Yeah. And it all stopped all of a sudden, right? And I think one of the things I've realized right away was I'm missing the human connection, right? And a lot of the reasons why I liked the job I was doing at the time was because I was having those human connections, right? And when I realized that, again, we went back to the kind of drawing board and we were thinking, how could we establish these human connections beyond meeting, right? Beyond the normal hallway chats and so on at conferences. And that kind of what gave us the motivation to start these different channels. But the other thing I wanted to add is, I mean, Robert also, Robert, you had a Discord channel that was actually started before you even joined ARM, right? So, and it was kind of your own side thing. And today it's still a community run channel, right? That we participate in. But effectively, again, it's a way of communicating and connecting with other fellow developers or engineers that are kind of doing things and trying to figure out how to do the next thing, right? So I think at the heart of all of it, there is really the will to kind of, or I guess the need for connecting with others, right? And kind of exploring projects, exploring ideas, brainstorming together, right? I think that's really what pushes me to do this and to do all the things that we do at work.
No, that's pretty.
Well said.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I think you're right. That human aspect of it, and that seeing people at conferences. I was thinking earlier on this. I think this week is a year since I've actually been traveling or been on a plane or anything, and it's been quite. I was since I was on a plane continually, pretty much. It felt like. It's been a real change, and you do feel that you want to connect to people and talk with people and such like. So things like, and that's, to be fair, that's where the embedded hour the idea for the embedded hour came from, was because everyone was kind of sat working from home, and you might want to talk to other people and ask questions and such like. So
can I add something to that real quick, because I just love the whole humanizing and being in kind of let's call it human contact with people and what we're missing, right? But on top of that, I really want to let everyone here watching know that when you think ARM software developer, when you think ARM software, when you think ARM community, picture Alessandro and me. picture Adam right here, like picture us. We're humans. We're here. We want to work with you. You know, like I would be glad to put my email here. And if there's something that, you know, you're doing that's exciting in the ARM ecosystem, you're building something cool, like let us know, let us work with you. Like, let us have some fun too. So, I mean, we are the humans behind the ARM software developer movement, let's call it. And, you know, we really want to be a part of it as hopefully as much as you want to be a part of it. And that's kind of like also another kind of humanizing the whole ARM experience, I want to say.
Sorry, Adam, you were going to say
something. No, after you, sir.
No, I was just going to say that, you know, to some extent, our role is interesting, or our company is interesting, right? The company we work for, because, you know, to some extent, it's almost invisible, right? Like a lot of what we do is enablement, right? And enablement usually is kind of what people forget about. I think we're just working on this project right now to showcase some of the cool stuff that our community are doing, people in our community are doing. And one of the, you know, we had this idea of like highlighting unsung heroes, right? And for example, like people at Linaro, working at Linaro and like doing, you know, development work for enablement of kernels and so on. It's interesting because it's something that, you know, you don't see, right? Like if you're trying to develop your application, if you're trying to like connect your IoT device, if you're using an Arduino board or Raspberry Pi, you don't get to see that. Like you don't get to like appreciate that, right? And to some extent,
hidden. Yeah, it's all hidden. It just works, yeah.
It just works, and I mean that's the goal of it, right? Like it should just work, right? And it, you know, there's someone on the internet, John Masters, that, you know,
I know, I follow John Masters. Yeah,
is a big, yeah. You know, I love when he says, you know, let's make ARM boring, right? And actually,
but he's got a really good point. It should just be boring. Exactly. I didn't steal it the other day. I was on a different thing, but I stole his line the other day. I was on a panel talking about embedded vision and connecting different types of cameras, and should there be a standard? And I was like, well, if you think about it, it should just be really boring. It should just be, let's go. I've plugged in another camera. It works. Now I can go do my fun application and fun. And that's what you get though with that ARM. I mean, John's kind of focused more on the server side, I think, isn't he, on that? But that's what you get with the sort of the, you know, the Raspberry Pi, the Arduinos, the 96 boards. You know, you hit build, and it just comes together. You get a distribution. You put it on your ARM chip, and it just works.
This is, of course, though, keep in mind, this is, of course, after all that enablement happened, right? So all the developers on the lower layers of the stack,
it doesn't just work. It didn't just work.
It didn't just work for them. Yeah. So like once you get into the application space, then it's like, yeah, well, we want it to be boring in that space. Yeah. But I mean, kudos. Thank you, everyone out there. You know, you kernel developers, firmware, all the cool stuff that you do at those lower levels. Amazing.
Yeah, it's a real, and again, you're perfectly right, because you do take it for granted a little bit that it does work when everybody else has spent many hours making it work. So this is that's an interesting point. So Tim, I don't know if you can see the chat, guys, but Tim was just saying that, you know, these channels like that, you know, they're making people easier to access information, to understand what's going on, and I think that's a big difference. You know, I think a lot of times if it was just conference after conference after conference, if you're not really at that conference, you don't really get that information, perhaps. So you don't make that connection because you were too busy actually working to be going to a conference or something. So things like this, I think, help build community as well.
Actually, have a good comment. Oh, Alessandro, please.
No, sorry, I was going to ask a question to Adam, actually, or to both of you, really. I mean, you know, that makes me think, right? Like how are we going to go back? What are we going to do when we go back to traveling? I mean, or are we going to go back to traveling? Because I mean, to some extent, there's a trade-off here, right? Like the more you're at home, the more you can do things like this. The more you're traveling, the less you're available online or available, you know, 24/7. So it's a bit of a trade-off, because if you're at a conference, you're physically busy and you can't, you know, be online chatting or talking to people. So it's, you know, what's your take on that, Adam? Have you thought about that?
I think it's an interesting one, because actually, you know, I mean, I look back, like 2019 for me was manic. I was literally on planes all the time. In fact, I was a one-man ecological disaster I was flying to. I mean, I literally was. I was never here apart from, you know. But then sort of obviously COVID happens and 2020 happens, and I'm at home. And actually, what I found was actually my productivity went up. Because I was a lot more productive because I didn't have as much dead time while I was traveling, and I found that I still sort of was able to communicate and network with people and build things up. Oh, we all had to change. And I think that's one of the interesting things about COVID, actually, is a downstream sort of thing of it all, and how it's going to change the world of work and how we all interact. So I think conferences will come back and events will come back, but I'm not sure there will be as many. And I think I think a lot of companies will be a lot more focused on travel now, as well as to, well, is it really necessary, or can it be done? Can it be done over Zoom, and can the necessary connections be built and such like? I think we just lived through one of the most interesting, life-changing, world-changing events, actually.
Yeah, not many people. Well, everyone is going to get to say they lived through this, but I mean, not many generations get to live through something like this, right? Like, this is literally a once in a lifetime kind of thing.
Let's touch wood. Hopefully not. Hopefully we're seeing the back end of it.
Yeah.
But it has really changed how we interact. But I think it's in everything. There's kind of downsides, and obviously, the deaths and everything are really quite tragic and heartbreaking, and people being ill is heartbreaking. But at the same time, it does open up opportunities, and ways for perhaps working and communicating that we've never done before, such as the embedded hour, or the coffee shop, the innovation coffee.
Or people just realizing that you can work from home. Like, people are okay working from home, and some companies might be switching models, their whole model to work from home. Most people might.
Was it Salesforce the other day that announced that they never expected people to come back? 9 to 5 in the office is kind of gone, I think they were mentioning. So they're a big IT company, really a big tech company to be doing that.
Yeah. So I want to, if I could also comment on that, the whole back to travel thing. I think that we'll find a way to continue doing things like this. I mean, I can recall even when I was traveling, I up in Montreal, I went to a Canonical event, right, for, some of the snappy stuff they were doing. Sure enough, there I was gathering folks for a live stream in the hotel lobby, right? And we did it, and it was in person, and we had a blast. At the ARM Dev Summit, not ARM Dev Summit, but at the time ARM TechCon 2019. That was my last year with Lenaro. I also did a live stream with some folks right there on the show, on the expo hall floor, right? I think that there's going to be ways and for us to kind of like still interact. And I think that's the point, is like, we're there, but the people who aren't able to make it to the conference, like, we still need to provide ways to engage and bring the conference to people around the world. And we will continue to find ways to do that and be on the floor, walking everyone around all the cool things and talking with, people about interesting tech innovations. So I think that that's still going to happen. You're right, though. I do think that probably, at least in the short term, there's going to be fewer conferences, fewer travel, less travel. And then slowly people are going to start forgetting about it. And probably within several years, it might go back to normal.
I mean, I must admit, I think once flights are available, I think I might be getting one somewhere. I don't care where, just anywhere,
Just need to be on a plane.
Yeah, I was having dreams about it, for a while afterwards, like dreaming about flying somewhere. It was really odd.
Gosh, some of the stuff, I'm sorry, like some of the stuff that you hear from these airlines, and I don't want to make this about airlines, but they're like, we wipe down all of our seats, and now we have N95 filters in our plane. And it's like,
you weren't doing that before?
You weren't doing that before. So on the bright side, silver lining, maybe, companies and people are realizing the importance of hygiene and protecting people and fellows in your society, right? I mean, caring for one another and caring about general health. So silver lining of all of this, hopefully this kind of creates a little bit of an uptrend in human kindness and care for society.
I really hope it. I really hope it does. So we went off and we've talked about the COVID and the impacts on COVID and everything. But so what else did we have on our list of on well, I say our list, I mean your list, because you're much more prepared. You two were much more prepared than I was, and you came prepared with a list. So I mean, let's talk about the innovators a little bit. How big is that program at the moment? Because I know it's we have regular calls on it and everything in it, and they do some really exciting stuff. So you've got people like me that do the sort of the the boring embedded stuff, but you've got people that are doing robotics, the open MVCAM, the open MVCAM, and all sorts of really cool, exciting things. What's that? I can't quite see. What's that? Oh yeah, the little open
the open MV. Yeah.
That's it, right?
Yeah. I saw they.
Oh, sorry, please.
They were doing a thermal one of that. Did I see that somewhere?
They're definitely releasing a new model, I believe. Yeah. So the Innovator Program, interesting program, right? And other companies have programs like this. Alessandro is probably going to be able to talk more about this. I joined after the Innovator Program existed, but I do want to share the link here because it is open to the public. While we are focused on finding, let's say, I don't want to say like, oh, the best and the brightest, but there are people out there who really do enjoy, not only building stuff, but showcasing it and writing documents. It's kind of like the full everything that a developer can pretty much bring to the table. Those are the developers that usually make it into the Innovator Program. And it is a very exclusive group. We do keep it, very tight knit because, again, we want to offer a extreme level of support for these developers because then Adam gets to do things like this, right? And, go out and go to conferences and talks and, we want to support those things. And he would have been doing that regardless of us supporting him. So like, that's kind of what makes an innovator. You're an ARM innovator because you were kind of already doing these things before we made you an ARM innovator. You were just already amazing. And so, yeah, anyways, ARM Innovator Program, Alessandro, do you want to give a breakdown of that? I used to be an innovator before I was at.
When you joined, you have to give up being an innovator.
I did. I had to give up the title.
I mean, you still have it. Like we still know you're an innovator, but we had to officially we had to remove you. No. I mean, seriously. No, I think you covered it really well. It's really about like finding individuals out there that are good at building stuff and like really clever and experts in their areas, but also good at speaking about what they're building and like explaining and educating others. Because I think at the end of the day, we're trying to have a bigger impact in the developer community, right? And the innovators are, as I said before, an extension of us, right? So effectively, we don't know anything. We know just a few things, and there's so much stuff out there, right? Like that's impossible, as I said earlier, for us to like kind of get in-depth knowledge about the different areas and fields in which ARM plays a big role in. So we have to lean on external experts. I mean, the other way to do it could be to like have your own, developer evangelist team of like 100 developers, right? But obviously it's a bit more expensive. No, but aside from that, it's also not scalable, right? Like reality is it's not scalable because it's something that, you would have to, you'd really have to like find people and almost like constrain them, right? Because what, the beauty about being an innovator is that you don't have to be constrained. You don't have to work on ARM or ARM projects or projects with us all the time. You can do whatever you're doing. And all we're kind of doing together is a bunch of projects throughout the year, a bunch of developer activities, again, to educate others, right? So it's really about like kind of transferring that passion to others, the passion that you have already. So we are kind of amplifying. I think actually David Tischler, another of our innovators, explained it best.
I love that guy.
He's awesome. He explained it really well, right? I think in one of the interviews, he said, I don't have a platform as big as ARM's platform to reach as many developers, as many people. So, they're amplifying my message effectively, and I'm paraphrasing, but, that's kind of messages, we are amplifying what he's doing already, as Robert said, and what Adam is doing already. And again, we're happy to like amplify more people's stories. And I think, the other aspect of it is really, again, about humans, right? I think, maybe it's only, maybe you can read this on marketing books that I haven't read because I'm not a marketer, but I think, somewhere there's probably written that you have to put humans first, right? Like, I think we're all looking for human experiences. I don't care about pure technology unless I'm like trying to fix a problem, right? Like if I'm looking to how do I do X? Then I'll go and look for the guide. But, when I'm reading stories, when I'm reading about, or I'm listening to people speak, I'm usually interested in the human side of it, right? Like rather than the technology only, right? So I think that's the other aspect of it. We're trying to kind of lead, I'll end with a question, actually. Adam, you're talking about technology all the time. You're doing all these blogs and all these things, but why did you want to have this chat about communities, for example? I mean, what is it that makes you interested in talking about different things aside from just the technology itself?
So it's an interesting question. For me, actually, one of the reasons I like writing about technology and sharing so much, actually, is I think, and it's going to sound very, very, very canned and such like, but we have a responsibility to help each other, and to help particularly help younger engineers. I mean, I get to do the cool things I do, and I got to see the world and work on some cool projects and talk to people like you and be known around the world, because people helped me when I was a young developer, because people helped me when I was a young engineer and pointed me in the right direction. And that's the same thing. That's really one of the reasons why I do a lot of writing and talking about the things I do. It's why I spend hours if people ask me a question on Reddit or Twitter, or if they email me in, as opposed to actually doing paid work that the customer actually pays me for. I spend hours actually helping people do that, because it's the community is what makes it. You all sort of stand on the shoulder of giants, don't you? And we all help each other out, and we all move forward. So it's perfectly true, though. It's perfectly true. And even a great example is what we were talking about earlier on. The application. We were talking about the application layer and the distributions, but all the forgotten heroes that we're working on actually creating that distribution. We all build upon each other. We all build upon each other's works, our successes and failures and such like, and take it to and give us something that hopefully allows us to have a lot of fun. Because to be fair, let's be honest, there's a lot of jobs in the world, and I don't think there's any quite as much fun as being an engineer. All right, maybe being a fighter pilot, maybe
I'm actually
fighter pilot, my original choice, but then I became an engineer. So
I'm actually surprised that you don't have one of your amazing T-shirts today. I've seen a lot of T-shirts I really like that you've been wearing in the past few years. About engineering, right? Like you've got a lot of engineering T-shirts.
I do, yeah. I thought, I was told to be smart for this. So and this is lockdown, so this, like 4:30 on the first Friday of the month, I'm in there ironing a shirt to wear for Otherwise, normally I'm in like a T-shirt and stuff. And normally they've got things on there, what's you can. There's no point. They're all witty things about engineers. Yeah.
I think next time you're gonna have to wear one of those. I mean, we're not going to be on, but I want to see you. I'm going to come and watch it and see if
we had Max the Magnificent on. Clive Maxfield.
Oh, yes.
Everybody must know Clive. And we were all wearing Hawaiian shirts for that, because he only ever wears Hawaiian shirts. So.
Yeah.
Adam, do you mind if we answer that question in the chat from? It looks like
no, go for it. Yeah, go for it. Which question? There were a couple of them.
He's asking how do you think companies employing developers need to change to use these types of media, issues with proprietary information, or discuss issues using these types of media in great information? Sorry. Do you mind if I address that?
Go for it, please.
So Tim, I think I'm understanding what you're asking here, and you have to be obviously very careful, right, when you're working with a big company. But I will give huge respect to ARM, as Alessandro mentioned earlier in this stream, about how there was this kind of slow transition over to starting to work more with developers, closely with developers, and bringing kind of like this human aspect to the developer ecosystem, the ARM developer ecosystem. Getting on a call like this, you have to obviously represent the company you work for, and you have to represent the company you work for properly, right? It's not necessarily, I don't want to say it's hard. I don't want to say it's easy. To me, again, and I'm sure to Alessandro and Adam, like doing things like this are very fun. And working in a developer role, there's very little proprietary information that can be kind of pushed out like this, right? I mean, we're talking about enabling and working with you on the different layers of the stack, and developing things and innovating new products, and doing stuff like that. There are, of course, teams within ARM, look at any other big companies, there are teams that hold on to some very private information, and there are things that happen and that are private information. But in general, that kind of information usually doesn't surface on calls like this. And the type of stuff that we're doing as developer evangelists, it kind of does make it, I'd say, a little bit easier to not mess up, to be able to use these platforms to talk with you all about these things, because we're talking about the things that we love and the things that we know, and the things that we love and we know just happen to be more public, right? And so I think that's probably the best way to put that. I mean, a lot of it is open source, right? Like a lot of the projects that we collaborate on and we talk about and we collaborate with developers on are open source. I run once every month, actually, another stream called EmbedOS Tech Forum, where we talk about EmbedOS, one of the open source RTOSs that ARM contributes to. And it's, again, it's an open source project. So, everything that's there is public. And a lot of the stuff that we work on, and I think, to your point, Robert, we're kind of shielded away from kind of proprietary information because it's not our job, it's not our role, and we're not, nobody tells us, like, we don't need to know, right? And to some extent, I'm happy that that's the case, because I think it would be much harder if I knew all the secret information that I couldn't be sharing, right? Seriously though. So yeah. I'm actually glad that nobody's coming to, nobody's calling me up and telling me secret information. But I think that's, I think another aspect of this question actually is, I think we're kind of changing, the world is changing, right? Not because of COVID, but the world is changing because I think authenticity is becoming more and more important, right? I think, I remember, I'm Italian, and I studied in Italy, and in Italy, I think the way you address professors and the way you address like your managers and so on is a much more hierarchical way. So you're always like addressing people, in a hierarchical. You're always kind of making sure that you address them in the right way and so on. I see that as like being almost like an older way of approaching the world, right? Like I think today we're moving into a world in which I feel like we're all addressing each other as equals, right? And we're all very much more authentic than perhaps like a few years ago, and we're not hiding behind brands or things. And I think to some extent, like when you're trying to help a developer, when you're trying to help someone building something, you have to if it doesn't work, you have to be honest, right? There's no point in lying and because it will come out, there's
it always.
Yeah, exactly. And Adam, you know about this, right? You're writing a book, and I'm sure that you're gonna have to make that thing work, right? You can't just lie about it.
We were so nervous because we'll be talking to you about it for a while, but our entire premise was we're not only going to write about it, but we're going to do it to prove to the people reading the book that we actually know what we're talking about and we're not just writing about it. So then you get the boards back and we're like, I hope this works. I really hope this works. But so far, like I say, it's been everything really has been on the board's been really good. It's interesting too, you mentioned the embed though, because that's I have another little project ongoing in the space industry, and we're using the embeds as the test equipment to mimic to mimic the satellite. So that's quite an interesting little development there.
Maybe I should invite you on the other stream, and you can talk about that if it's public. I don't know how much.
It's public. I'd love to come and talk about that. It's quite interesting because when you think about running out of time. But you think about a lot of things, and a lot of these boards do, the open source, the board. And Rob, you've got so many boards behind you. It's fantastic, But all these little boards, they're really good for allowing you to hit the ground running. And you know what? Well, like an engineer, often you think, I've got a problem, therefore I will design something that fix that. I'm going to design my own board and such. But 9 times out of 10, you can go looking around, and your job as an engineer is to pick the right tool for the right job. So you can go looking around and say, well, can I do this with an Arduino? Can I do this with an embed? Can I do it with a Raspberry Pi? Can I do it with an FPGA? Can I do it with and there's just so much about that. You can generally find something that you want that can really rapidly accelerate your design. And that's something, again, the last 10 years, the proliferation of development boards and the access to hardware is phenomenal. What have you got there, Alessandro?
No, I was going to show you. I mean, it's interesting. You brought that up, right? Like the fact, sorry, I need to, yeah. it's the Arduino Portenta H7, right, with the Vision Shield attached to it. And what's interesting about this board, there you go, you got it. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I think we're transitioning to a place where companies like Arduino and Raspberry Pi are actually becoming, enabling you to really take stuff to product. I mean, more than me when it comes to like building real products. You've got more experience than me, Adam. But I think that board, from my understanding, is ready for being productized effectively, right? It's got all the standards.
It's got everything. It looks like it's a really good product. It looks like it's there, and you can start putting it in. And it's an interesting concept, and you see it for a while. These little modules that can be dropped in. You or I could, most engineers could design a board that does that. But when you look at the timescales it takes to do that, the cost and the risk actually of not getting it quite right, and the fact that the customer's not coming to you the customer's not really coming to you to design that board. The customer's coming to you for your IP, your intellectual, that application space thing generally. What you really want, they're great. And the Raspberry Pi, the new Raspberry Pi Pico, that's
got that as well.
You see, I don't. I have quite a few of those.
It's super tiny, right? Like it's actually. I mean, I've got the Nano here. It's more or less the same. It's slightly bigger than the Nano, but it's quite.
It's fantastic. I ordered when they first came out. I ordered some, and I'm still waiting on them coming. But the capabilities of that are phenomenal. And joking aside, we're involved in a satellite program. And the other day I worked out that the little Pico could probably do everything that we're doing. The only difference is to do what we're doing, we've got like 18 boards and 18 FPGAs, but the little Pico could.
Let me ask you, actually, I think this is an interesting point that you brought up, right? You said how like these boards are becoming more usable effectively, right? By engineers that want to build stuff. Mm-hmm. I think there is, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on this. There is this concept or this, I guess, concern that engineers have about abstraction layers, right? And to some extent, you could see you could almost see, if you extend the concept of abstraction layer in the software world to like a pre-made board, you can almost take that as an abstraction layer as well, right? In the hardware space. And it's like, I think there is a trade-off, right? That you were saying about like, really you want to differentiate your application rather than like spending time building a board, and that goes all the way up to stack, right? I mean, you could build your own operating system or whatever, but like you're not going to do that, right? And I think it's interesting because I wanted to kind of get to the point of asking you a little bit about the Pink actually, because I've started with FPGAs, right? I've seen your tutorials around Pink, the open source Python framework for. And that's super interesting. I mean, thinking about programming an FPGA with Python is just amazing.
Pink's fun. Pink's one of the best things I think I've come across for kind of opening. And it's interesting because Pink started out as a university sort of thing from Xilinx University to the university program to get people to be able to get students to be able to access the programmable logic and use Python as a framework. And I mean, if anybody's listening and they're not familiar with Pink, Pink essentially runs on the Zincs and the Zinc EMP SoCs, where you've got ARM processor cores and programmable logic. And what it does is it allows you to be able to use Python to control the programmable logic. And the concept behind Pink is there's a range of community overlays to the programmable logic that you can download and put on there and accelerate. So you can have you can have machine learning overlays, you can have image processing overlays, and they're all available out there. And if you want to, you can create your own. And that's where it begins to get interesting, because what I've seen is a lot of my customers and clients are actually using Pink for rapid prototyping. Because if you've got a Zinc type system where you've got process system, programmable logic, you've got to write your embedded Linux system, you've got to get all your DMA stuff up and running. There's a heavy lifting there on your software team. And as well, you've got some programmable logic where you've got to put in there. But with Pink, you can run the Pink image on the board, which is a Linux distribution. It's got all the drivers built into it. You drop the overlay in, and it just works. And again, you can start doing your testing and your risk retirement and everything much faster and much easier than you could if you were doing it via writing your own pedal Linux type distribution. But it's an interesting journey. And engineers, I mean, every engineer, I'm sure, would love to start out with a bucket of sand and start designing everything from scratch. You know, we're gonna have to start with, and we're always great at that. We're always really great at finding a reason why you can't use X, Y, or Z, and why we need to start with a bucket of sand and start and build our own fab. Because do you know the most dangerous word in engineering?
What is it?
Interesting. When an engineer says to you, it's interesting, that's the point at which you watch your timescales and your budgets move out. It's the point at which you're like, right, come here now. Because it's interesting. But I've seen it so many times in like many different companies. You know, engineers are great, but we're also very creative, and given enough free will, you know, we'll go off on this nice, interesting tangent for us, but not necessarily for the product. So these boards are real, you know, the boards, the frameworks, it's really quite good, because at the end of the day, and I never really realized this until I really started working, you know, running my own business. But at the end of the day, the reality is we're there to deliver on time, on quality, and on budget to the customer, so as we can actually get paid and pay our bills at the end of the month. So and those boards, you know, that really does help you do that.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, it's almost like in the last few years, I think there's been this shift towards. I mean, you said it before, right? Like software-defined world, right? I think more and more people have realized how much it's important to take advantage of abstractions and actually utilize higher level languages, utilize frameworks that are out there already. We see it with it, for example, embedded OS. I mean, it's an operating system that has a lot of pieces in it, right? And a lot of them are actually kind of higher. I mean, there's a kernel, obviously, an RTOS kernel, RTX, but then above that, there is a lot of other pieces, right, that are allowing you to do different things. And I think, it's an interesting concept in the microcontroller space, because, again, there's been engineers for a while that like just would have liked to just start from scratch, and there's still people that do, right? But to some extent, it's a lot of work, and sometimes like it doesn't really diminishing returns, right? Like a lot of times it doesn't really give you that much more, right? So.
No, you have to. Engineers are great, but that's why you need really good engineering managers to kind of focus them and make sure that they're going on a direct path, shall we say, to getting the application done. Well, guys, I mean, we've been talking for nearly an hour now, and we're getting to the back end of it. So, I mean, is there anything you'd like to say as we wrap up? Is there anything we were going to talk about that we're looking at your list? I think we've mostly covered all the.
There is one thing. So first of all, thank you so much. But I'm sure we'll both thank you one more time here. Alessandro and I do a live stream every week. And I believe you told us that we can plug this. But
yeah. Please plug away. Feel free to plug away. Yeah.
Cool. So Innovation Coffee is the name of the live stream. Our YouTube channel is what I'm going to share in the chat.
Already shared it.
Alessandro,
on top of it. Yeah, that YouTube channel, we just started that like 6 months ago, as we were kind of already talking in the stream earlier. We're trying to get out there on the ground, working with developers, having these experiences together. Alessandro and I have a lot of fun every week. We bring on guests. We have all sorts of cool discussions. In the last 3 weeks alone, we've met with the folks from the Raspberry Pi Foundation to talk about Pico. We've met with folks from Arduino to talk about the Arduino Portenta, among various other things. And then we met with a bunch of folks from the creators of like TinyML, folks from Google and Edge Impulse. And we meet with a whole bunch of cool people, and we'd love to have, your viewers join us.
Sure Edge Impulse, that's the name. They look really exciting. I'm doing some work with Edge Impulse, and that looks really, really quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably find it the same. You probably find the same thing, Adam. But it's been fun the last 3 weeks. I mean, well, the last year has been fun, but with all these streams that we did. But the last 3 weeks, I've had a chance to interview employee number 1 of Raspberry Pi, Massimo Banzi of Arduino, and yesterday we had Pete Warden and Zach Shelby from. Yeah, and it was like, I mean, I love my job, right? Like it's fun to have a chance to interview all these people, but also it's fun to, I mean, what I find fun is also learning about all these things, right? Because I don't know, half of the stuff. Well,
it's
a tenth of what they know, right? And it's good.
It's always interesting to learn about the journey that they've been on as well. It's always, because nothing.
Love it, yeah.
You think you know it and you think you understand what happened, but the reality of it is it was generally something completely different to what you think. But look, we're at the hour now, guys. So I guess I should let you go. I'll thank you very much for coming on and talking to us, and thank you actually for letting me be involved in the Arm Innovator program. I do appreciate it. It's I wonder every day why you let me do it when you look at everybody else on the list. But
no, you're amazing. You're amazing, Adam. You are amazing.
Thank you very much for coming on and chatting. Rob, you're gonna have to go away and find something to do with all those Jetson boards behind you now as well. Yeah, how many have you got there? There must be at least 10 or so. That's quite a good collection.
We have a project coming out soon, so maybe we'll come back here if we give a little plug. But if you again, also Innovation Coffee, stay tuned. There's a really cool project coming out, a community project that will open up quite a bit of hardware to people. Very excited to announce that. But it's about 3 to 6 months down the line.
Yeah, that'll be quite exciting. Yeah. I'll come along to the Innovation Coffee for that, and maybe we'll have you back and you can talk about your exciting project. But look, we'll let you go, gents, and I'll thank you
so much.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for coming on.
It was a pleasure.
I'll get to buy you
much,
dinner and a few beers at some conference pretty much